welcome to the Meeting Your Soul podcast. I'm Farah, your host, and today I have an extremely special guest, an extremely exceptional episode, and the fact that this is all new, and I feel like some magic is really going to occur from it. So I am really excited for all of you to listen in. And let's go ahead and introduce our guest, this stunning woman here. This is Sylvia Hadnot, and we actually met. I don't even truly remember how we like formally connected, but I would have to say we were running around the same circles, to say the least, for very many years, I believe. I remember always knowing of you and always just like being slightly like fascinated by you. That was like, who is this girl and why do we have so many mutual friends and how do I not run into her on a more regular basis? And she's a fine little number as well. So I think she just caught my eye a few different times. but but then we were able to connect recently through the wellness space and within yoga, and she's now teaching at Hot and at Shefa Yoga, which I am ecstatic about. She's such a great teacher. And then we've just been gelled, and I feel like divine timing has brought us to connect. So multidisciplinary artist, wellness practitioner, yoga teacher, communications. She does all the things, and she's also a published author as well. So thank you, Sylvia, so much for being here.
You're so welcome, Farah. Thank you so much for having me and for that really juicy, warm welcome. That was sweet. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And just so that our listeners can get a very comprehensive view of like how you're showing up in the world and how you're giving back, can you give a little bit of background about where you came from and how you're kind of showing up in the world now?
Yes. Wonderful question. So I have like a few different ways that I'm showing up in the world now. One of my favorite ways is just simply to be creative in the world. I think that that is somewhere that I have always been since I was a little girl. And I wrote my very first newsletter when I was 10, called the Hadnot Gazette. Yeah. It was a neighborhood newsletter that I used to organize barbecues on my block. I don't know why all the adults listened to me and my little newsletter, but they did. So
Yeah, that is absolutely adorable.
thank you. Yeah, I think that the adults must have thought it was adorable too. So, now I do communications work professionally, and that's kind of my professional creative offering into the world, whether that's like social media, supporting clients with like newsletter, internal comms, external comms, that kind of stuff, and really making their communications a beautiful experience, both for them and their own internal teams, as well as their external audiences. And I also, having been through a few different bouts of burnout and recovery, have been leaning into like mentorship of other creatives to support other creatives with being able to find sustainability and flow in their creative offerings. So that's really where my creative work and the wellness work come together. And then, of course, like you were saying, I teach yoga, which is just such an amazing labor of love for me. And so it's so grounding. Yoga found me when I was also very young, 15 years old, and it's been such a powerful medicine also to mitigate and keep burnout away and like find my own sustainability and flow through all that I do in my life. So thank you.
Yes, I love that. And actually, I didn't know that you'd been practicing yoga since you were 15. When did you first experience, or what was your first experience within yoga?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I hated PE class because I thought that the boys were creepy and annoying. And and then also my PE teacher was creepy and annoying. Quiet as kept. He did get fired. And then I think he may have served some time. So my intuition was right.
Your intuition
Anyway,
is always spot on. One of the things I think we gel very well in our like cosmic spirits in that way is that I think we
yeah.
both lean into that and listen to it. So you were spot on, and that is super fucking weird. But keep going, continue on.
Yeah. And no, I love that you took that moment though too, because intuition is so powerful. And I think if I spent as much time listening to my intuition as I spent trying to people please over the years, my life would be so different. So
No,
yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
yeah. Well, and I we'll definitely come back to yoga, but and actually we'll continue with yoga, and then I would love to talk more about intuition, because I think that that is something that has really connected us on a deeper level. And I think intuitively we were guided to one another at this point in time too. And the alignment, I saw this thing was like less manifesting, more aligning. And I was like, finding the alignment within your life and then moving and flowing within that is such a beautiful gift. And it's such a superpower that I think some people just naturally have, but underestimate the power of. So we'll touch back on that for sure. But
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me finish this story fast because I want to get back into the alignment and intuition talk. Yeah, so my intuition was right, but I had this high school counselor, Mr. Sugden. He was a huge lifesaver for me back then. And he was like, well, you do have to do PE to graduate, but you don't have to do it here. So you can go over to the community college and look at their catalog of courses and take a class at community college that would qualify for PE credit. So I had taken like one yoga class or like been introduced to yoga once during like general PE or something like that. And I was like, that was awesome. Shavasana is dope. I'm trying to just like stretch and lay down and call that PE. I'm going to go do that. Little did I know it was going to break open this like whole world of finding like I wouldn't have called it this at the time, but like nervous system regulation, being able to like find sovereignty and agency in my own body, increase my capacity for decision making. Like I had no idea what was about to unlock for me. I was just like trying to avoid creepy boys. But
I'm just trying to avoid weirdness, but also
yeah,
talk about alignment. Did that then not allow, like, trusting yourself to be like, this doesn't feel right, I'm gonna go do something else, and then
yes,
an avenue that was for your own source of self-discovery, and
yeah.
honestly changed probably, I think, to a certain extent, trajectory of your life too.
Oh, 1000%. Yeah. I ended up then dating this guy whose mom was like a Buddhist meditation teacher. And so he would take me, when I would be at his house and it was like Buddhist meditation night, his mom was like, so if you're going to be here, you got to come meditate. That's just, because moms are like, this is the rule.
Yeah.
You don't get to go upstairs and just make out. You have to come
You guys have to
meditate.
for at least a little bit of time.
Exactly. Right. So then she taught me how to like meditate from a Zen Buddhist perspective. So yeah, these two modalities of healing came to me just sort of like through my life as a young woman, really, and definitely changed the trajectory of where I could go.
Well, and what a gift that was at that age too. I always think about this, and this is actually why I think, and we also align with the importance of self-discovery in these wellness practices at a younger age. And why I emphasize it so much is because I always think, God, I wish I had this when I was in junior high or as young as possible in all reality, to be able
Yeah.
to access meditation, to be able to quiet my mind, to be able to listen to more of my intuitive, like gifts and like whispers of your heart. It's like, if that, I don't know how much it would have shifted things, but I definitely know that I would have had a whole lot less angst as a teenager, to say the least.
Yeah.
So then you actually started meditation quite young as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to joke that the first time I meditated was when I was like 8 years old, and my mom was taking me out on errands, and I was just so bored, and she would be like, well, find something to entertain yourself with. And so I like made this promise to myself to never be bored again. So I would just start paying attention to like the blades of grass moving, the trees floating in the wind. And like it was really just this thing to like stop being so bored and like, feeling, but
So
I didn't realize I
right.
was like meditating. Yeah.
That's like one of the five senses meditations is one of the most feminine, but like it's one of my favorite meditations, where you literally just tap into your five senses, and a lot of that's just
Mm-hmm.
to the sounds that are surrounding you, looking at the little small details of what's going on, especially within nature. It's such a simple way to tap into presence that people vastly underestimate, and the accessibility of it, right?
Yeah. Right. Totally.
Oh, I love this. Sorry, I am learning new things about you. So I'm like, I had no idea. I like knew that you had became a teacher a few years ago, or like just became
Mm-hmm.
certified, but I didn't realize the length of time that you were a practitioner leading up to that. So that makes a lot of sense though. And then kind of like tying all of this together, how did you decide to, or when did you decide to become a teacher, and what was the motivation behind that?
Yeah, so I had been so back when COVID first hit, and there were the quarantine orders, so we couldn't go anywhere. Um, I was kind of sitting around, and I felt like I sort of had this choice between like leaning into drinking an entire fifth of tequila every day or leaning into getting a little more embodied every day. And I sort of like teetered and tottered through that choice. And if anyone else has similar choices, one of my favorite books that I'm rereading right now is Survivors on the Yoga Mat. And there's this chapter called Heroin or Headstands. And it just talks about how yoga can really support you in having more choice in your body and your mind and your spirit. So we're in COVID, and I'm like, all right, how about I challenge myself to learn how to do a headstand? Because at the time I couldn't do headstands, and now they're like my favorite pose.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like filming myself. Oh, wait, what?
I said, I think of your birthday night, you doing the headstand and Carrie Park.
Yeah, exactly. No, I did a headstand like under the Space Needle on my birthday. There was some tequila involved in that one, but whatever.
We're good. We're good.
Right, all in balance. But yeah, so it was COVID. I was like filming myself and my headstand journey, learning how to do it. And so I was really returning once again to this modality of health that I has been like so familiar to me since I was very young. But in my early adult years, I feel like I really teetered and tottered with my commitment to it. And then I did make the controversial decision to lean into one of the few studios that stayed open. And I know that different people really needed to do different things for their health, and that was one of the things that I chose to do for my health, was to go to yoga in person, and it really gathered me. I lost a bunch of weight that I had gained through stress. I found my center again, and then after that, when a lot of the quarantine orders had been lifted, I was like, okay, I got to get serious with this. It's time for me to now become somebody who can create these spaces and offerings for others who are on a similar journey.
That's time. Yeah. And honestly, it sounds like once again you were honoring your alignment and that time and place to say, like, I've been doing this for this long. I've now dedicated so much more of my efforts into this practice, and like how much a gift that it's been to me and how profound it's been in your like own journey. And I think that that's why a lot of teachers become teachers, is because, and I used to always love my main teacher Sylvia, which one of my main teachers is Sylvia Mardini, which is also very random that you guys both have the same name and it's within the yoga world. But
okay, is it random or is it something more?
Fine, is it not? It is. Very true, very true. But she used to always say, we're not instructors, we're teachers. And that was always something that was really held very closely to my intention behind wanting to, how I showed up within the classroom and that space. And because I think it's not just the instruction of postures, it's the instruction of the embodiment, the somatic embodiment of what these movements are actually meant to provoke within us. And if you use them as a tool, that they can truly unlock things that you would have never expected or even known were there, I think sometimes as well. But I find that absolutely fabulous that that's like how you like entered into it and then became a teacher. But then we'll zoop tie it all back into the intuitive nature, because is intuition always something that's been really strong for you? I know that you mentioned a little bit about that people pleasing behavior, but has there always been kind of this like weaving of intuition within your life, and how do you strengthen that on a daily basis?
Yeah, definitely. Intuition has certainly been a huge thing for me. I almost said tool, but it's like so much more than a tool. It's like kind of like a way of being. It's like an energy to tap into. Like yeah. Um it's definitely always been super big for me. I always know if a decision I'm going to make is aligned or not. There have been times in my life where I chose people pleasing over alignment. And then there have also been times in my life where I felt like my circumstances were so constricted that I just could not see a pathway toward making the decision that I knew was more aligned. So those have been kind of like two of those times, or two of those sort of way types of times where I've chosen not to be aligned with my intuition. Um, and like the people pleasing one is pretty easy to figure out. The circumstance one takes a little bit more honesty with yourself. Like, all right, babe, how did you get yourself into this circumstance where your only choice feels like a survival choice and not a truly aligned choice? And really taking that time to look back on all of the decisions, all of the unaligned decisions I made up to that point, all of the times that I ignored or disregarded my intuition that got me to this point, and then, learning from that and making those kind of incremental intuitional steps in the more aligned decision or more aligned path for myself moving forward. Yeah.
Well, and I love that you brought up the honesty factor because I think, but it's probably more of a systemic, deep rooted like change that needed to occur, which
Yeah.
takes more effort, it takes more time, it takes more attention, it takes
Yeah.
more like the excavation process. I feel like is so much more engaged and intensive that it just like, but I think the resistance, and this is something that I've always believed, is when you have a major resistance or there's a sense of discomfort or extreme, like even sometimes pain, sometimes that's the only catalyst that gets you to where you need to be. And so, unless you're experiencing that firsthand,
Yeah.
it's really easy to ignore it because you don't have to, it's easy to just stay
Right.
where you are. And sometimes I think that shock factor allows us to move towards alignment, but usually there's some trudging back before we can get there. So, but I think that ultimately to live in flow, and
Mm-hmm.
I think of that flow state, which is one of my favorite psychologists. I always say his name wrong. I butcher his name. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi or Chicks. Anyway,
Oh, I do know who you're talking about, and I also don't know how to pronounce the
I
name.
actually have a podcast. Listen to the podcast. I pronounced it correctly there. I also corrected myself on that podcast.
Nice.
It's
You
a
can put it in the show notes.
show notes, check the show notes. But he
Yeah.
talks about this flow state and how we can access it. And a lot of athletes experience it. You find it within yoga. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people find it in different ways. But there is an opportunity where you stop thinking so much and you just are moving in this place of fluidity
Yeah.
um and in true like and things just divinely fall into place without us having to force it, and I think
Yeah.
that that's that idea of flow, of finding alignment. And I think I've been thinking about this a lot ever since I read that quote about like less manifesting, more aligning, because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
manifesting, I'm so good at the efforting part of it that I
Yeah.
almost hyper focus on the effort, that I
Right.
forget that there's also this element of surrender where things can just come to me, and all I
Mm-hmm.
need to do is to be in alignment and to trust myself. I was at that yoga festival a couple weeks ago, and the little card I got, which I was so frustrated by, but it was like, which is just ridiculous because it's just me. But it was like, follow whatever feels good. That's actually how you were meant to arrive where you're meant to be.
Yeah.
Don't, and it was like, there's a bigger lessons at play. And I was like, oh, just do whatever feels good. That's all I have to do. That's all. This is like no more. This is like I literally just have to like trust myself and like go towards pleasure. Like I think some
Mm.
in our minds we think it has to be more complicated than it is, but in reality it can be so simple. So
Yeah.
I love that you said that, but I do think that there's an efforting that gets us back into that state, and then once we're there, it's very fascinating to me how you can stay in the on that I want to say path, I want to say trajectory, but it's like almost you stay in that momentum, you continue the momentum
Yeah.
forward. But
Right.
I don't know what you
I
did to your hair, but you look so fucking cute. You were just so cute. You guys.
thank you. I know I'm like sitting here like looking in the camera, like, let me fix this.
I just looked, I was like, wait, does she look different? Wait, okay, keep going. But how do you access that? And like how
Yeah.
stay in that like mindset? Like what
Yeah.
did it for you?
Yeah, so I'm a big eco nerd, right? I actually have like a master's degree in environmental studies. And so I love nature metaphors. So I like to think of it like a river. Like, where and like because rivers, they have banks on either side. That's like your boundaries. There can also be some like obstacles to the flow, like maybe a big boulder, maybe a beaver has come in and built a dam. Like, there's all sorts of things that can get in the way of or sort of like redirect the flow of the river. Sometimes there's a really big natural disaster and it completely redirects the flow of the river, right? Sometimes a bigger river comes through and then you're just like caught up in the bigger river's flow and you're like, oh, okay, there was a flash flood. Oh my gosh. Like there's all sorts of different ways you can take that metaphor, but right. And I think, even when you are, quote, not in alignment, you're still a river with life force energy that is flowing in a direction. It's just about, is this directing you toward crash out, toward burnout, or
Mhm.
is this directing you toward like participating in the flow of the entire world's waters in a way where you can contribute and you can receive and you can find that balance between contributing and receiving versus like going headlong toward burnout or crash out because you're either like receiving too much or you're contributing too much and there's not like that balance.
Exactly. And I think of the fact that we're all ultimately moving towards the same ocean, or you moving
Mm-hmm.
to another, maybe you're moving to a different ocean. There's multiple oceans you can enter into, but that they're ultimately we become a part of the bigger consciousness
Right.
no matter what. So like you said, like we're always still energy flowing and moving. It's just life experiences come and they may shift the course in which we're or the direction that we're going towards. But I think each one of those, elements and events are still very significant and very much a
Yeah.
part of the history and the character and the design of the river.
Right.
Really like this metaphor.
And yeah, I know nature metaphors are so powerful. I think for so many reasons, I could go with whole other podcasts like about why nature metaphors are so good, but just trust they're good. But also circling back to what you were saying about pleasure too, it's like I think pleasure and desire are such a powerful like compass for where to direct that river, especially in like societies like ours where pleasure and desire are kind of like demonized or like people have this idea where it's like no, you have to like work really hard every day, and it's like there is labor involved and like labors of love are so much more sustainable because like you're like excited to do it, you're happy to do it, like it's like part of your pleasure, it feels good, and it's like good to feel good, and I think that that is scary for some people.
Well, and I became a Dharma coach and life purpose coach, and so much of what that surrounds is going towards things that excite you, that you're passionate about, that you love, because that excitement then naturally infuses into your work and also into the people that are surrounding you and that you're engaging with within that space. It's like the more that you lean into that, the more you actually then infuse the entire world with more love. And like, isn't that ultimately what we're here for, is to create and to receive love in every facet
Yeah.
of, or at least that's what I'm truly trying to create within my life now.
Yeah, and I also do want to acknowledge that it is from a place of great privilege that you and I get to even have this conversation about like more love, because there are some people living real lived realities like right now where they actually like every day is really scary. And I don't necessarily know that or think we need to get into all the details of everything that's going on globally, but I saw a post on TikTok yesterday that I thought was like so amazing because I know like when there's all these global atrocities going on, sometimes those of us who are in this place where we can prioritize love, peace, joy, happiness, it can make us feel a little guilty But this woman was sharing that actually what we are doing when we are in a place where we can contribute more love, more life, more joy, more happiness, more desire, we're offering that energy up into like the global consciousness, like you were saying. And
Mhm.
so it's like if we are not taking seriously and taking responsibly the capacity that we have to actually like move toward and be in more pleasure, be in more desire every day, then that's actually really doing a disservice to ourselves and everyone around us. So it's like this guilt trip stuff is really not helping anyone either when we start to get into that vibe. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that and help people understand like you really are doing more for others than you might realize when you commit to your own desire and pleasures and when you have that space to be responsible with it. And sometimes being responsible with that space looks like leaning into your desire, leaning into your pleasure.
Well, and to create more joy around you, because couldn't agree more with everything that's going on within this world, and that people are truly living in fear on a day in and day out basis. And that is really hard to even consider or even to imagine what it feels like to feel some sense of peace within yourself, because that's not even
Right,
a possibility, because your basic needs are not being met. And I think that
right,
we were talking about this a few other days ago. It's like when your basic needs are not being met, it's really hard to feel calm or any sense of peace within yourself, or even like any kind of like calm, like even to find your intuition. I think the more that usually we find our access our intuition is when we're more in a relaxed state. But if we're in
yeah,
mode, that's not possible. And
right,
and that is, evolutionarily there for a reason. But at the same time, like I think even in like I think being able to recognize your mindset and where your mind is and where your thoughts naturally drift towards, I think is something that is a real is actually a technique in order to be able to shift. Because I think even when things can, and we were talking about this last year, well, this last year has been absolutely atrocious on so many different levels for me. But I would say like there were so many times where I was like, I could either really freak out and I could really be in a negative space, or I can use this. I can like look at the most simplest of things and find gratitude. I can look at the simplest of things and find pleasure. I can literally
yeah,
do like, or I can even be just like a pillow, a place to lay my head. Um, was something that I was stressed about earlier this year. And so I was like, to have that and to be able to make sure I have food on a table or our table for my child and for myself, like those are things that I'll never take for granted. And I think a lot of
yeah,
times do within this country and around the world, as I'm in a
yeah.
hotel in Milan. So we won't go into more detail about it, but you never know what life's going to throw at you. So then, but in those moments, to never underestimate the power of them, and then also then to be able to show up fully for them and still find gratitude even when things look a little gloomy, I guess is the best way to put it.
Totally, totally. I mean, I'm so inspired by some of the people all over the world, and also by myself in other times of my life when I've been completely at rock bottom. Um, and the way that I see people prioritizing gratitude and like finding things to be grateful for. I shared this in one of my own recent podcast episodes. Like what you focus on grows.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention to all of the negative stuff, like all the time, every single day, it's going to really take over your whole aura and mind. And yeah, and if you can find at least three, but preferably seven things to be grateful for every day, like those are the things that start taking over your aura and your mind, and it multiplies.
Yeah. Because I don't think you can create, and that's what it comes back to, is like finding an alignment. You cannot truly create from a place of scarcity. So like if
Yeah,
you want to invite in more abundance or whatever it is, then you have to be able to shift yourself and align with that so that it naturally flows to you. But if you're cutting, like I've recognized I cut myself off from it because I'm like, no, like I have to create it. I have to be the one that creates it. It's not just going to come to me. It's not going to just land in my lap. But I think sometimes there are these moments that when I stop trying so hard, it actually does just fall on my lap. And I'm like, well, shit. And that's what I was talking about. Like, oh, just follow what feels good. Oh, okay. And then when I did that, I was like, oh, and actually everything then ended up working out. So like, why do I feel
Right.
the need or even the lack of like the lack of um what's the word I'm thinking of? It's like worthiness, even some ways
Mm.
that I can just access that on a voluntary basis, and that I've done enough, and that it's like I almost feel like I have a well that's been built up that it's like trying to get to me, but I'm like has a key that needs to be opened up and locked, and it's like open the goddamn door for her. So like I think that there's this moment for me right now. Anyways, I don't know why I went on that tangent, but I do find
No, I think it's like so important because it can be really scary to just go make the decision that's aligned with whatever feels good because oftentimes, at least for me, that is not a sensible decision
yeah.
sometimes, right? Like, and there's like this whole societal narrative about what's sensible and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And more often than not, the decisions that are aligned with my intuition are like misaligned with whatever society says is like the correct choice. Um, so like for me, especially as I get older, like I'm newly in my 30s, so there is like this whole new wave of narrative that I'm participating with as a woman in America now in my 30s. Um, it takes a lot of bravery to actually commit and make decisions that are aligned with what feels good for me, and trust myself. I saw you posted something on Instagram this morning and I copied you, about, I reposted it on my story too, about like how fiery it is to actually trust yourself
Yeah.
and know that you don't need anyone else's permission. You can just trust yourself, trust your intuition, trust your desire, trust your own pleasure, and like move from that place.
Yeah, and that actually will sync up you up with everything that you're meant to have. And that I
Mm-hmm.
think trusting myself, I years ago that was my mantra. I was like, I trust myself, I trust myself.
Yeah.
Um, because it was something, especially when you're going against the grain, especially when it's something that doesn't make sense to others, especially when people question you, people, especially people that you trust and respect question you. It's really hard to just like head fast, just keep plowing forward,
Yeah.
even especially within the creative field too, especially when it's something when you're pioneering something and no one has spearheaded this type of project or this type of lifestyle
Right.
you've even been exposed to or know about. And I think there's a lot of doubt that gets seeds of doubt that start to grow into something more, especially when everything isn't perfectly aligned and isn't perfectly in flow. But I think those are also moments where we just needed to learn something new in order to keep us moving in the right direction. Um, but yeah, how did you develop trust within yourself, especially because you've always been so creative? I do know this about you, that Sylvia recorded her first song when she was 5 years old.
Yeah, 5 or 6.
So like how do you trust yourself in those moments, and for it to already be a published author and to be a poet and to already have all of these creative works that are actually within the world around you at such
Mm-hmm.
a young age? I don't like I think there's a lot of people that are afraid to do that, and it seems like it's
Yeah.
something that's just naturally came to you, but I am curious to see how that's come along.
Yeah, I think I owe a lot of that to my parents. From a young age, they really invested in my creative spirit. I think both of them are artists, and I'm not exactly sure how intentional it was, although I did have a recent conversation with my mom where she said, I just wanted to give you everything that I didn't have when I was a little girl. And I was like, oh, Mom, that's so sweet. Um, and so my dad is a visual artist. He can pick up literally any medium, and whatever comes out of his hands is a masterpiece. It could be charcoal, pencil, paint, oil, acrylic, clay. It doesn't matter if it's a visual medium and he puts his hands on it, it's going to be a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And then my mom is a writer, and so she writes essays a lot. um, I want to try to get her to write a book, but we'll see how that goes. Sometimes she doesn't like when I push her, but I mean, I'm her firstborn, so I feel like that's my job, is to push her. um, so I owe a lot of that to my parents. They put me in all sorts of different art classes and stuff when I was a little girl, which is how I ended up getting published and my work out into the world. And then I've always had really good taste. Like I I was born of two artists. Like I don't know how I was gonna not have excellent taste, and having the time, space, and freedom to be creative, to for people to tell me like, oh yeah, this is awesome, keep doing it, and just really keeping that spirit going from when I was really young into when I got older. Like I've just always had the audacity, I think.
Yeah.
And I did struggle with my self-trust when I started to notice myself making some misaligned decisions, or decisions that were aligned with crash out or aligned with burnout. And also I had my reasons for making those decisions, and I'm not upset at the life that I've lived, really. Um, I think I have been someone who has learned the hard way a lot of things. And I'm leaning into learning my lessons more easily now. Um, but yeah, so I think, and I really appreciate what you said too about creatives specifically, because so often creatives are one of one, and they are the one. Like we are the leader that is creating the path for everyone else to follow. And then we're also oftentimes so unique. So not only are we leading, but we're leading in a brand new way that requires us to listen to, I think it's divinity, something that's greater than ourselves, but you could also call it like the one consciousness, like the hive mind, whatever, you want to call it, the universe.
I couldn't agree more. I do believe art and beauty is from the divine. Like I feel like that's, and there's certain people who are able to be conduits to share that with the world in a very their own unique way, but everyone has their own personal expression on how they that gets executed. And that's why I think for creatives it's like you have this vision, you have this like thing that you know that you want to put out into the world, and it's like trusting yourself enough to like, and for it to be as pure as possible. I think that's what then speaks to people on an artistic level. That's when you like feel the emotion. Like I was in Florence last week, and like the amount of art that's come from Florence is insane. But then you think of like the amount of detail and time it took for them to hone their craft, but also the trust that they had. Like Michelangelo was like 11 years old when he did one of his first like sculptures. And then there was like Botticelli's, like one of first Botticelli's, he was like 17 when he did his first painting. And there was like he like it was like the it was like the it was his master, his like teacher's wife, and she was holding a child, and it was supposed to be like the Mary and their child, or Jesus, and like they were she was tickling the baby. And that's why it's such a profound piece, is because it like brought it to life that she was tickling him to like make him laugh, because that was like reality instead of like the detail that came along with that.
That.
But
Yeah.
then you think of joy and like love
Mm-hmm.
and connection, and the realistic element of that and the relatability of it is what then speaks to people when they see it. And so when you're talking about this art and relatability, I think that that's to be to transmute that and to be able to share that is, I think, then what connects all of us to higher consciousness and to one another too.
Yeah. Yes. So that is so true, because I think that in this like place of higher consciousness, that's where um we're all aligned with each other, right? I think that there is this thing, whether it's a vibe, a consciousness, like the universe experiencing itself through itself, whatever you want to call it, that connects all living beings throughout the entire universe, really. Um, I just found out that there's like this new thing called plasmoids, which are like these conscious entities of plasma. And yeah, you guys can Google it. We won't go fully down the rabbit hole, but they're just like clouds of existence. And like one of the ways that scientists realized that they were conscious is because what they do is they play pranks on airplanes and rockets that are going up into space, because they're just like, yeah.
No way.
Yeah. I'll find the TikTok video so you can link it in the show notes, because I don't think we should go too far down this rabbit hole. but I just thought it was so cool.
That is so
Right.
cool. That's also just something to remind us, like, we're not, like, to think that what is in front of you and what you can see is all that's there is just such like, you're underestimating the divinity and like the universe and energy and physics and all of it. It's like there's so much more that's going on in front of us that we can, I don't even think can even begin to comprehend the fullness of it. So
Right. And I don't think we're meant to. Like, I think similarly to how Fibonacci sequence is this kind of like infinite spiral.
yeah.
Like there's an infinite spiral that you could go down the rabbit hole of, because there's just like infinite silliness, and like information and ways that consciousness shows up. Like humans are just one example of a conscious being, like, and we're really cool. I think we're an amazing species, but there are like so many other ways that consciousness shows up in this universe.
Oh, how do you see yourself in the next like 3 to 5 years? Like, I'm like, how do you want to be um kind of represented within like your community and kind of the effect that you have and impact that you want to make?
Thank you for this question. I've really been wrestling, struggling with this question this year, and I think this year has really been a coming home to Sylvia year, and really getting rooted deeper in myself, so that way I can actually expand my impact in a sustainable way. Because in the past I've had really shallow roots, but I do have a big reach and a big impact and a strong light. But when those roots are shallow, it's really easy to knock the tree over, to knock the lighthouse over, get into that burnout crash out moment, as I've been saying. Um, and so I have come to realize that what I like to do is first and foremost like be creative, right? And like lean into my professional creativity and be able to offer my taste and my eye for design to people who maybe don't have it as much like I do. And that's okay. Like we all have different talents and skills and abilities.
Yeah.
And I really love working with organizations that are on the vanguard of building something new for our future, building those newer systems. So whether that is like an organization that is exploring cooperative economics, like a different kind of economic system than racialized exploitative capitalism, or if it is an organization that is exploring like social emotional learning for adults in organizations, like a different kind of way of interacting with each other while we're doing business with each other, so that it's not as transactional, it's more reciprocal, so kind of doing this kind of communications and creative communications work to help those kinds of organizations expand their reach and impact. I like doing that. And then I also really enjoy mentoring other creatives and helping them understand how is it that you do go through this process of rooting deeper into yourself, like really growing strong, 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 deep, deep, deep roots. So that way, as a tree, you can grow up. You can still have that flexible trunk that can withstand like windstorms, that can withstand tough winters, whatever it is that you need to be able to withstand, but then also expand your reach, your impact. Because besides organizations that are building the future, I think creatives are the past, present, and future in one, right? Like we are the people who have the access mentally, spiritually to this ancient kind of wisdom that is going to support us as we apply it to building these new futuristic contexts. So, yeah, people on the vanguard of new systems, new earth, supporting them with expanding their reach, and then really offering some mentorship to creatives. Eventually, I would also like to own a wellness center or three that serves all of the above people in like holistic wellness for their bodies. And we shall see how that dream comes to life.
It will, well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like you are already on the precipice of doing all of that and so much
Mm-hmm.
more. And it's been so beautiful to watch you bloom in the way that you have,
Mm.
even from afar. And then now to be even closer. I know, you know, I love you. This is literally, we were like, let's do a podcast together because it's essentially us talking like we normally do it, just like day-to-day life. A
Yeah.
little bit less talk about maybe some other personal items, but that's okay. And that's important too. But I would say that there is an opportunity right now, I think, for creatives to really take the forefront of
Mhm.
making larger systemic changes on
Yeah.
a much broader scale than I think has been done before. But then I say that, and then I think of, honestly, Italy is, I don't know why I was just about to cry all of a sudden, but I would say Italy has
Mm.
shifted my perspective on art and the importance of art, even though I'm always been someone that's just deeply inspired me. But then just to think of like an entire, like one of the most ancient civilizations is where 90% of art, like our history, and that art is actually history. And then so much of where it stemmed from, with especially in the religious context, was that they, for people that couldn't read, they would, look at pictures, and that's how they were
Mhm.
telling the stories. Like this has literally been a part of the fabric of the human race. And why do we even think that, like, why, like, how can we even reduce the importance of it to something that seems like frivolous when in actuality is the baseline that we are all
Yeah.
working and that we're always seeking as well. And and so when you said, I think creatives are really at this, like, going to be this one moving us forward, and I was like, but we always have been. And I feel like
Yeah.
even now, just recognizing it, and I feel like the creatives to own the importance of what they're sharing with the world is actually what is like, and that's exactly what you want to do and what you are doing.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I'm thrilled to see what comes of all of this, and to just continue to see you just be you, because it is,
Thank you.
you are beautiful and divine, just,
Mm.
and I feel so grateful to call you a friend, and also to be leading. We're going to be leading a retreat in Oaxaca next February, and so stay tuned for more information on that. You can also look up Santoshi Yoga Retreats, or wellness retreats, excuse me. Just made it up, actually. Just recently created a new business. Sylvia's inspiring me and keeping me on track to do so. And we're just really wanting to share this message of, coming home to yourself, and also being able to trust yourself, and to create a more holistic lifestyle that supports you in whatever endeavors you're pursuing, from a place of love and joy and desire and pleasure. And I think we all need a little bit more of that in our lives. So thank you so much for being here and joining me for this
Mm.
conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm also really grateful to be able to call you friend and colleague and future builder, co-creator. So thanks for being in my orbit.
Ah, I love being in your orbit, and I'm so excited that we got to have this conversation. We could easily go on, and honestly, you just have to come back because we need to talk about. We talked about nothing that we said that we were going to talk about. I don't know why I'm not surprised, but here we are, and but I do. We'll just have to continue this on, and
Yeah.
where can people find you if they're interested in connecting with you? How can people find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram. I'm Earth Mom on there, but it's spelled a little different. So it's at Earth, and then mom is spelled a little bit like Om. So EARTHMAUM. And that is a play on words. Yes, I am a poet. And from there, you could check out my business, haseverything.co. It's in my bio at haseverything.co, or check out my website too, haseverything.co.
Easy to find, and connect with her. She's an incredible person to just